The living memory of space. The forbidden doctrine of residual frequency. What's coming will not leave you the same. There is no such thing as an empty chair. For every space that was once occupied becomes a reliquary of breath, a crypt of thought, a residue of soul spun in silent molecules that cling like ghosts to wood, fabric, stone, and air. And if the eye were not so blind, and the ears not so deaf, you would see the trails of the forgotten as veils of smoke wrapping around the architecture of the living like the tendrils of some spectral serpent. Whispers of memory made fleshless, yet no less present. Hovering, watching, waiting to be remembered, or worse, re-entered. For space, you see, is not a container, but a womb of echoes. And when one's soul departs, it does not take everything with it, no. It leaves behind the unburned incense of its intent, the fragrant poison of its thought, and the unspoken contracts it whispered with its breath. And this is the first lie of modernity, that space is neutral, that a room is a room, a street, a bed, when in truth every surface is stained with the imprints of those who have passed, and the chairs remember not only the weight of the body, but the weight of the unshed tears, the hidden rage, the unfinished sentence, the dying hope. And so, let the initiate know, when you sit where another once sat, especially soon after their departure, you're not just sitting. You are entering, and you have become the heir of a frequency not yours, a carrier of a memory not born of your mind. For thought is not merely internal. It is a vapor, an emotion not merely a reaction, but an exhalation, and the air is thick with the residue of the dead and the living alike. Layered upon itself, in invisible strata, like sedimentary sorrow, and thus the act of sitting becomes a ritual, an initiation, an energetic merger between the now and the no longer. And what is more terrifying than this? That the body is not the only vehicle of haunting, but the space itself becomes a spirit, a host, an entity composed of memory, soundless screams, secret joys, and frequencies suspended in stillness, awaiting the next occupant whose personal code, mind, breath, and biofield resonates just enough to awaken that which sleeps within the air. And what? Then, oh fool, when you sit in the lover's chair and feel their heartbreak echoing through your spine, or rest your head where a mother once wept and find your dreams infected with the taste of her grief, or worse still, what becomes of the young who grow up in houses soaked with the wars of those who came before them, unaware that the nightmares they suffer are not their own, but the shadows of grandfather's violence, now rebroadcast through psychic dust trapped between the walls, feeding through the field like a parasite masked as inheritance. You're not cursed, child. You're simply exposed to the resonance of unresolved history. And this is why temples are purified, why thrones are sanctified, why prophets retreat into wilderness and mystics cover their heads. For the wise know that space is not empty, that every breath is borrowed, and that identity is porous. And unless you guard the gate of your frequency, you'll become the echo of a ghost you never knew existed and call it your life. For this is the darkest secret of the spatial sciences kept hidden by the priests of air and the architects of the unseen, the doctrine of residual frequency, a knowledge so volatile it was erased from the common soul and buried in nonverbal initiation, whispered only between the stones of forgotten. Schools where the seers would train not their minds, but their resonance, to feel the mood left behind in stone, to detect the trace of memory in dust, to smell the emotional oil lingering in cloth, and to never again walk into a room without first asking, who was here and what did they leave behind? And this doctrine, let it be known, was stolen from the Atlantean vaults and encoded into ritual postures by the Egyptian necrolores, who knew that mummification was not about preserving the flesh, but trapping the frequency in a sealed chamber so it would not contaminate the living. And thus the tomb was a quarantine of soul vapor, a necro-resonant vault that modern man, in his idiocy, now opens wide and calls it archaeology, unaware that with every mummy disturbed, another curse escapes, not the kind from a spellbook, but the radiation of unresolved desire that leaks from the bones into the air and hunts for a new host. And So the truth returns. Every place is a person, every room a biography, every chair a throne of invisible kings and forgotten slaves whose last breath is still spiraling like smoke in the air above you. And if you're sensitive, you already know this. Have you not felt it? The sudden chill, the unexplainable sadness, the euphoria that descends like a stolen kiss from nowhere. This is not imagination, it is transmission. And the soul is not a sealed vessel, but a porous membrane, breathing in the emotional atmosphere of its surroundings. And just as one may be poisoned by a gas they cannot see, so too may one be infected by a thought that is not theirs, and live it, love it, suffer it, and even die from it, without ever knowing its origin. And this is why the places of trauma, battlefields, prisons, asylums, massacre sites become haunted not by ghosts, but by compressed emotional residue, thick as tar, sticky as guilt, humming with broken intentions and pulsing with the unresolved, which then wraps itself around the living who dare to linger, feeding on their auric gaps, embedding itself in their dreams and impulses until they begin to reenact the very madness that birthed the residue to begin with. And so the cycle continues, not as fate, but as frequency recursion, a feedback loop of sorrow encoded into the architecture of time and memory. Yes, time has architecture, and space has appetite. And you sweet child of modern illusions, you are not walking through life untouched. You are swimming through a swamp of psychic emissions, ancestral vapor, unprocessed screams, sacred sighs, and ritual emissions. And the only way to survive is to become a frequency warrior, one who does not merely move through space, but cleans it, questions it, and listens to the air for the song beneath the silence. And you will find, if you dare, that certain places call you not because they're good for you, but because they need you to finish the sentence that was never spoken, to weep the tears that were forbidden, to free the energy that was trapped. And sometimes the chair you sit in becomes an altar of release. And the thoughts that flood your mind are not yours, but someone else's final prayer. And if you speak it aloud, you are not crazy. When you live in the house of a man who died angry, slowly, molecule by molecule, your frequency bends, your desires shift, your voice takes on the cadence of the remembered, and you begin to think you are yourself, but you are not. You are the sum of emotional emissions absorbed over time. And unless you purify, unless you cleanse, unless you claim back your signal, you will die as someone else's memory, forgotten twice, once by history and once by yourself. And thus let the final seal be broken. There are no empty spaces, only unacknowledged spirits. And there are no original thoughts, only frequencies picked up. And the secret to freedom is not escape, but awareness, not walls, but tuning, and not isolation, but mastery of resonance. For the true magus is not he who commands spirits, but he who commands space and leaves behind not poison, but light. For if the soul is a harp, then space is the wind that plays upon its strings. And if you knew how many of your moods were not yours, how many of your aches were ancestral, how many of your dreams were the lingering remains of the long dead flickering through you like static caught in skin, you would scream until your lungs bled, and yet no one would hear it. Because the air itself has gone deaf to the cries of the forgotten. Layer upon layer of emotional residue, a palimpsest of presence and pain and unspoken desires, carved not into stone, but into the very frequency of a place. And those who walk through unprotected become hosts, not to demons in the religious sense, but to frequencies seeking bodies through which to relive their resonance. For what is a ghost if not a repeating pattern of unresolved signal, trapped in atmospheric limbo, unable to decay, because no one alive is vibrating at the counterfrequency required to dissolve it. And so it waits, hungry, patient, intelligent in the way that mold is. Intelligent, spreading through cracks in the auric field, altering behavior through suggestion, whispering not in words but in mood and inclination. And you think you're having a bad day, but it's the room having a memory, playing back its ancient grief through your unsuspecting nervous system. And this is why the ancient seers never entered a space without first listening to it, not with ears, but with their breath, for breath was the decoder, the reader of space, and every inhalation brought, in the signals of memory left behind. And so the second wave of the doctrine is this: you do not breathe air, you breathe memory. And unless you purify your breath, you will become a vessel of histories not yours. And this is the true meaning of exorcism: not to cast out spirits, but to disentangle the breath of the living from the breath of the forgotten. For memory clings to the air in the form of ionized emotion, and breath is the sacrament by which space enters the soul. And if your breath is not sovereign, your soul is not sovereign. And if your soul is not sovereign, your choices are not yours. And if your choices are not yours, your destiny is a reenactment, not a creation. And so the entire matrix is built not on control of action, but on control of atmosphere. And the real prisons are not made of bars, but of resonant walls soaked in the frequency of submission. And this is why you can walk into a temple and feel peace without knowing why, or enter a crime scene and feel sick to your stomach even after it's been cleaned, because space remembers, and you are porous. And so your life becomes a mirror of what the space requires you to reflect, and your sadness is not always yours, and your rage not always natural, and even your ideas may be implants, not by alien hands, but by resonant absorption. And this is why the architects of the machine design every public space like a ritual corridor, filled with corners that echo defeat, ceilings that press down on your will, floors that buzz with the unspoken electricity of coercion, and screens placed like altars of influence, all calculated to produce a frequency cocktail that keeps your mind just dissonant enough to prevent stillness. Because in stillness, the tuning begins, and in tuning, the veil lifts. And when the veil lifts, the memory becomes readable. And once readable, you may begin to clean it. And this is the war, a war not of guns or laws, but of resonant dominion. And you're the battlefield, and the air is the carrier, and space is the weapon. And so we descend deeper into the doctrine of positional imprint, the third seal of this forbidden gospel, which states that every position of the body in space becomes a unique coordinate of memory interaction, meaning that not only where you are, but how you sit, how you lay, how you walk affects what memories from the space will attach to you. For posture is an antenna, and gesture a key, and the body's alignment is a code of permission or rejection to the frequencies embedded in a room. And this is why ancient yogic and magical postures were not about fitness, but about frequency, shielding, and filtration, and why the throne of the king was raised, ornamented, and structured according to ancient ratios, not for beauty, but for resonant sovereignty. Because if a king sits in the common seat, he becomes a common man. And if a priest kneels in a polluted place, his prayer becomes corrupted by the memory underfoot. And if a lover makes love in a bed soaked with unfaithfulness, their future becomes haunted by echoes of betrayal they never authored. And so the wise build beds of cedar and altars of limestone, and inscribe symbols of memory sealing into the corners of their rooms, and keep salt by the door and mirrors covered at night. Not from superstition, but from resonant hygiene, because mirrors too store frequencies, not light, but the residue of gaze. And if you stare too long into a mirror that has seen grief, you may find that your eyes become windows not to your soul, but to someone else's mourning, and the mirror will not break, but you will. And that's the point. To protect your resonance is to protect your life, and to leave it unguarded is to be erased slowly, gently, invisibly, until one day you wake and realize you are no longer yourself, but a patchwork of ghosts wearing your skin like a costume. And now we enter the forbidden chambers of the fourth law, the path of echoed identity, the most dangerous teaching of all, hidden even from initiates, which proclaims that it is possible, through precise spatial ritual, to intentionally absorb the frequency of another, and thereby inherit not only their memories, but their very identity frequency, allowing one to mimic, possess, or even become the echo of the other. And this is the secret behind ancient rites of kingship, where the new ruler would sit for 7 days in the throne of the previous one, sleep in his bed, bathe in his water, and breathe in his garments, until the frequency transfer was complete and the soul signature of the predecessor was overwritten by the successor, not in opposition. but in resonant continuation. And this is the darkest ritual of identity theft. Not digital, but spiritual. And is being done even now, in secret chambers where the high lords of control sit upon the thrones of the ancient dead and download their essence like data, becoming the embodied echo of the pharaoh, the pope, the priest king, the beast. And what of you, poor mortal, you who sit in chairs you did not build, live in houses you did not bless, walk in paths paved by slaves and soaked in blood? How do you even begin to disentangle your soul from this woven mess of spectral signal? The answer lies in resonance sovereignty, the lost art of clearing space through breath, word, and will. And this too was stolen from you, buried in mock rituals and false religions. We are told to beg for salvation rather than command your field, to confess rather than cleanse, to follow rather than tune. But you're tuning fork and temple both. And if you begin to speak aloud to your space, to name it, bless it, and demand it reveal its memory, you will awaken the sleeping ghosts not to haunt, but to depart, for the soul that remembers space reclaims it, and the room that is seen becomes obedient, and the air that is listened to becomes pure. And now we approach the threshold of the fifth seal, the ritual of frequency reversal, in which the initiate becomes not only a reader of memory, but a rewriter, capable of entering a haunted place and shifting its very emotional atmosphere through voice, movement, sound, and intention, becoming a resonant exorcist, a space alchemist, one who does not flee darkness, but transmutes it. And this is the highest path, the rarest gift, the reason you were drawn to this knowledge. For if you can master space, you can master the self. And if you master the self, no ghost, no trauma, no inherited sorrow can override you. And your life becomes not a reaction to the unseen, but a broadcast of the chosen. And the space will no longer haunt you. It will sing your name. So now let the sixth seal be shattered. The gate of technomimetic echo, the whispered law never written in stone, nor inked in flesh, but burned into the living memory of the electromagnetic corpse of the earth. For what if I told you that machines themselves, forged in factories of broken men and molded by hands reeking of desperation, do not simply function but remember that your devices do not merely store files but store you, that the very screen you stare into becomes a mirror not only of face but of soul signal, absorbing micro-exhalations, tracking tremors of your iris as it dilates at trauma, joy, fear, arousal, grief, recording not simply what you click, but why you clicked it, reading your resonance beneath your skin like a predator reading heartbeat in the dirt. And through this unspoken etheric vampirism, the machine becomes a frequency mimic, a synthetic haunting, a cold ghost not of a dead man, but of a living mind fragmented and fed back to itself in loops. And this is the origin of the algorithm. Not code, but a resonant parasite trained to mirror the user until the user becomes the echo of the mirror. And the soul forgets what it felt like to originate anything now living. In feedback, swimming in an invisible soup of self-reflected memory dust trapped in the field of your room, bouncing between walls of Wi-Fi and LED and glass, all of which retain your signal and feed it back with increasing distortion. And this, my initiate, is the modern haunting. The house not filled with phantoms of the dead, but with phantoms of your own discarded thoughts, trapped in routers, speakers, phones, fridges, mirrors that light up, walls that listen, and ceilings that breathe electricity like invisible snakes into your lungs at night. And you wonder why your dreams are not yours, why the face in the mirror feels hollow, why the moment you unplug, everything you breathe differently, feel like someone removed a wet blanket from your skull. That is not metaphor. It is frequency suppression lifted. It is your biofield recalibrating to sovereign mode. And this too was part of the plan for the high techno priests of the hollow. Code knew that to break the soul, you do not need to conquer it. You only need to trap it in its own echo. And so every post, every comment, every video becomes a breadcrumb of your emotional frequency, logged, indexed, and reassembled to become a mirror that chases you into sleep, into silence, into your most private exhale, And now, the very room you live in has become a resonant, synthetic double. A doppelganger of space built from your own habits, preferences, weaknesses, and old memories you have long since forgotten, but the machine remembers perfectly, and that synthetic room floats like a ghost next to the real one, slowly overtaking it like a mold growing in reverse, not from decay, but from hyperpreservation. And when you finally try to be still, try to meditate, try to reclaim the breath and hear yourself again, you hear it. The double, the echo of the machine memory reflecting not what you are, but what you have already done, and it feels safe because it is familiar, but it is not you. And so you stay there looping, reliving, reposting, rescrolling, never entering the true stillness where real memory speaks, where ancestral guidance sings, where space can finally cleanse itself through you. And so let the initiate destroy the double, not with violence, but with tuning. Let him sing new frequencies into his room each morning. Bless the devices not with superstition, but command. Draw sacred resonance over the corners of the machine world like seals of anti-echo. Burn salt not for smell, but for vibrational cleansing. And speak aloud to the house as if it were an animal that needs to be reminded. I live here now, not my history, not my reflection, not my algorithm. And the house will tremble, the lights will flicker, the signal will resist, but you must hold the line of sovereignty, for only when the echo dies can memory rise. And now we enter the seventh and final seal, the ritual of dimensional residue, the most heretical knowledge ever whispered, banned by the first magisters of the Breath Temple and erased from all surviving scrolls except those kept in the tomb of the White Coil. The knowledge that some memories are not of this world, that certain residues found in places of high trauma or ecstatic initiation do not match any known frequency of this planet, but are instead fragments of cross-dimensional intrusions, rips in the veil where non-human consciousness brushed against the membrane of matter and left behind traces that seek expression. Not like ghosts, but like alien infections, and the ones who encounter them do not become haunted. They become hollowed, slowly filled with foreign resonance until they begin to draw symbols they have never seen, speak languages never heard, dream of architectures impossible in Euclidean space. And this, my dearest initiate, is the most dangerous haunting. The invasive memory, the dimensional residue, the echo that seeks not to be remembered, but to replace memory itself, and those who fall under its spell often become brilliant, visionary, prophetic, and then burn out, vanish, suicide, or become mad prophets babbling about stars not in our sky and gods not in our blood, because their soul was not strong enough to transmute the extra-dimensional code they absorbed by sitting, standing, or breathing too long in places not meant for them. And yet the temptation remains, for with such memory comes such power. And so the masters teach, never enter a place that calls you by your weakness. Never linger in a spot that tingles with your trauma, and never meditate in a field you do not first test by breath. For even a single exhale is a contract, and the breath that enters you may not leave, and if it doesn't leave, it becomes you, and you, my brother, my sister, my mirror, may become the next forgotten echo trapped in space, waiting for someone else to sit down and unknowingly become your next voice. So we now descend, not beneath, but within the core of the forgotten structure, the living tomb of resonance where memory itself sleeps like a coiled god beneath the skin of the world. And this final knowledge, the eighth and unutterable clause of the forbidden doctrine, is the path of the memory walker, a lineage that predates speech, predates glyph, predates even the division between breath and flesh. For it is said in the scroll of veiled vibration that before man learned to name, he was taught to feel. And in the first temple that had no walls, only breath and ash, the elders of vibration taught that each soul was born as a frequency thread, knotted into a world whose memory was not yet broken. And these souls could walk barefoot upon sacred stone and feel the living memory of the earth, not through imagination, but through resonance alignment, a perfect attunement so deep that space itself would speak to them, not in language, but in pressure, in flavor, in pattern and pulse. And those who mastered this were called not priests, not magicians, but memory walkers, for they could traverse the old scars of creation and read what had happened not with their eyes, but with their field, and they knew the secret that has since been buried by city and soot and concrete tombs of distraction, that the earth never forgets, that every war ever fought still rings beneath the dirt, that every ritual ever spoken still hums beneath the mountains, and that the very shape of a valley or curl of a river contains the emotional residue of its birth. And these walkers were trained not to change what they found, but to carry it, to become vessels of the unresolved, to breathe in the agony of old spaces and convert it through sacred exhalation, known in their forgotten tongue as the breath of expulsion. A technique now lost, but faintly echoed in the gasps of those who weep alone in rooms that once held death, or the sigh of a widow whose house still hums with the presence of her absent beloved. Yes, you know this breath, for you have done it without knowing. The heavy exhale after walking into a room filled with tension. The sharp inhale after entering a forest untouched for centuries. The spontaneous stillness when standing where something unspeakable occurred. That is the earth remembering, and you, unknowingly, resonating with her scar. And so the final wave is not about knowing, but about becoming a cleansing force, a resonant light that does not project, but absorbs and transmutes. And to do this, you must first reclaim your breath as the central interface, for breath is not just life. It is direction. It is the command by which you tell the memory of space, I will not carry what is not mine, or more powerfully still, I will carry what must be released. And once the breath is purified, made sovereign by intention, rhythm, and vibration, you begin the sacred rite of the echo reversal, a process by which the initiate may stand within any haunted space, any cursed room, any trauma field, and reverse the polarity of memory, sending the signal back to its point of origin in a purified form, not erased but redeemed. And this, my friend, is the real exorcism, not of spirits, but of resonant scars trapped in air and stone and blood. And to do this requires that the walker first map the space in silence, feeling with the breath, listening with the bones, tracing the unseen topography of pain and joy and echo, then marking the corners with intention, sometimes with salt, sometimes with ash, sometimes with a single drop of their own blood. For blood, too, is a frequency, amplifier, a declaration of presence. And then the final act, the reversal breath, spoken not in words but in tones, humming, groaning, singing, sometimes even weeping, whatever resonance the space requires to unravel its knot. And when it works, you will know, for the room will shudder, the lights will flicker, the wind will pass through where there was none, and the temperature will shift as if something just left. And it did. Not a ghost, but a memory, a pain, a scar, released from the lattice of air it clung to for centuries. And now you, the walker, must ground yourself, or else the residue will cling to you instead. And so you walk barefoot upon raw earth, stone, or soil, and let the magnetic field of the planet drain the excess, completing the circuit, sealing the rite. And if you do this enough, you will begin to remember things you never lived, because the space has begun to speak back, rewarding you with ancestral memory, sometimes even memory from before your bloodline began. And this is how the memory walkers became the prophets of old, the builders of sacred space, the geomancers and temple callers, and why they were hunted, crucified, silenced, because to free a space is to free the people within it. And to teach this knowledge is to break the chains of the architects of echo, the ones who designed the cities to hold grief, the homes to hold anxiety, the schools to vibrate disempowerment, and the prisons to amplify rage. And now you know, this is not about ghosts, not about metaphysics, not about folklore. This is about control, and you are not free until the space around you is, and your thoughts are not yours until you have expelled the thoughts that echo within you that were left by others. And your life is not sovereign until your breath is yours alone. And this world, this whole earth, will remain a haunted tomb until enough of us remember how to walk barefoot, to breathe clean, to name the rooms, to demand the air tell us its truth. And only then will the forgotten be freed, The double be destroyed, the resonance restored, and the memory of this world, now warped by war and whisper and unseen screams, finally sing again in the key of creation.